It's honestly really fun to think about, but I would say a few months after the conference championship game, like my heart would palpitate. Like it just brought me back, and I was actually with our assistant coach yesterday, one of our assistants, and he was saying like how worked up he was, and I think it just came down to us caring so much for those kids. Like four of them had lost 2 years in a row in the conference championship when they knew they had the talent to win, and they all like just did extra work in the summer and in the preseason, and then during the season they would all just wanted to do extra work. And so in that championship game, you would, if you watched it back now, you would see like us down by 9 with I don't know, 6, 7, 8 minutes to go, and nobody ever pointed fingers. Like there was one time they sat in a 2-3 zone for all we had, I think, 16-minute halves. So for like 30 minutes they were just in a 2-3 zone. We didn't shoot too well that game, and so one of our players in the middle of the free throw line passed it right out of bounds. Like he got the ball and just threw it out of bounds, and at least two guys ran over and gave him a high five. Like, and then everybody, and then there's, if you look at the bench, we have two thumbs up, and we just had like a thumb up culture, and that just meant like you're good. Like it's all good. Like it happens. And throughout the season, we were building those habits. But in the championship game, like they had lost 2 years previously, and they easily could have blamed each other or just gave up. They like
You are listening to the Beyond the Scoreboard podcast, transforming athletes into leaders on and off the court with host Coach Furtado. Coaches, are you ready to take your passion for coaching and turn it into a full-time career? I know the challenges firsthand, but the Make Money Coaching Sports program helped me take BTG basketball full-time. If you're tired of juggling coaching part-time and want to fully focus on doing what you love, this business accelerator will give you the tools and support to make it happen. Hit the link in the show notes below to learn more and start living your dream. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Beyond the Scoreboard podcast. I have a previous guest from the Bridging Impact podcast, one of our favorite guests, Mr. Dan Horwitz. Dan is a varsity basketball coach and also a leadership consultant and a published author. So welcome back to the show, Dan.
Yeah, thank you so much, Justin, for having me on. Really enjoyed our first episode together and excited to chat today.
Let's get right into it because we had quite the technical difficulties, which has unfortunately shrunk our time that we have, but we end up, maximizing time, which happens all the time as a coach. I'm sure it's happened to you before where you have a plan, you want to do a certain amount of things, but then you realize we just got to focus on the priorities. And the priority number one of this conversation is let's get your definition of what Beyond the Scoreboard means in your program.
Yeah, thank you. And I think our next play mentality has been pretty good going through
There we
this
go.
little bit of adversity. But definition of beyond the scoreboard, I would say it's just controlling what you can control and knowing that that is enough to hopefully get to your desired outcome, but you know that you gave everything you had um, through that process. And so I think there's a phrase that's called outcome aware, process driven, and I think that's something that there's a pretty good correlation between the two. Just because when the ball's thrown up to start the game, like everybody wants to win, and so that's being outcome aware. But process driven is like what are we doing every single play to hopefully achieve that outcome.
Absolutely. And so I know with your team, y'all had some great outcomes in the previous season. And I know you're huge on culture, and I know that it really helped that ball kind of bounce the right way, so to speak, a little bit more often than not. But there's a foundation that comes with it. So when we're talking about culture, let's kind of dive into what that looks like. First, what's the vision you painted? What's the temperature you wanted to set? What was that environment going to look like? And then I'm going to have some follow-up questions on some of the challenges that may have come up as you started that. But let's paint the picture for the listeners first.
Yeah, so we did a few things to create our culture. And so I was the JV coach at my high school for the past 2 years. And then this past season, I became the varsity boys head coach. And so the spring before 2023, the springtime, we met everyone in the basketball program, we went in the gym, in a big circle and huddled up, put our arms around each other, and we talked a little bit just about how important it is to continue to I guess build the relationships throughout the summer with their teammates, and something else that we talked about was that our big goal was to win the conference championship because the past 2 years the team had lost in the conference championship. So I actually heard on a different podcast a coach mentioned the idea of taking a picture of like the banner or a trophy or something to motivate the team. And so I asked everyone in the gym before they left to take a picture of the conference championship banner in our gym and put it as their screensaver or background of their phone. And so that way every day they had that in the back of their mind that that's what they were working towards. And think that was something we did early on that helped build that, start to build the culture.
I love that. A couple of things I hear in there is number one, you talked obviously about positive touch, connection, coming together, talked about the power of building relationships, and then also just having everyone shoot for the same goal, right? Everyone was rowing together, so to speak. And so with that, when you're building that vision, did you have any pushback or challenges when you first started out?
I would say that we didn't have too many challenges as a coaching staff, um, but it was more about teaching and educating them on what a championship culture looked like
Hmm.
and evaluating some of the behaviors that they had done the previous year that I believed kind of led to a negative or losing culture, and we identified those, and we met in one-on-one meetings or as a group with the returning five seniors and talked about what we collectively wanted this season to look like. And so I think there was just a little bit of growing pain of like a teammate falling over and maybe two guys that had played JV for me like knew to sprint over and help them up, but the some of the returning guys like maybe a few steps too slow. So we continue to praise those types of behaviors, and they got really into it, and they like started. They got from a point a few months into the season where they would kind of like fight each other to be the person, one of the two people to help up their teammate up off the ground, and it definitely took a lot of attention and energy to get them to get to that point, but uh, I think it was well worth it, and they were willing to buy into it.
I love that. And so let's go into those principles, those behaviors. And I know we probably talked about it on our last podcast, but if you want the honest truth, I bet most of the listeners, including even some of myself, have forgot what some of those principles are. I know you're big on helping them up, but what are some of those other principles and championship habits and behaviors that your team implemented?
Yeah, I really enjoyed talking about it, and I'm gonna give a shout out to Tammy Matheny, who's also a two-time guest and the one that connected us. She's amazing,
Yep.
and she was talking about the Olympics, and it was really validating as someone who preaches culture that a lot of what was happening in the Olympics, in terms of the way they treated each other and cared for each other and the energy they brought, you would see that just by watching the team that won the gold. So some of the things that I really value, I think, are the bench, like the bench energy, and are they engaged and locked in? I think in the semifinal or final, the Olympic game, LeBron had an and one, and you could see Anthony Edwards and Halliburton and Joel Embiid, all guys that they compete against during their NBA season, all just pumped up and like really excited for him. So we talk about the bench and how their energy either influences the team up or brings them down. And so that's one that we talk about. I did mention the huddles, but I think the huddles are like a mini timeout in a game. So if your team gets fouled on a shooting foul, um, or you fouled the other team, just huddling up, putting our arms around each other, and communicating a message, I think is really important. And I would say one more that I would like to share is called "Point to the Passer." And Dean Smith from North Carolina, the head coach, really emphasized that. I think he may have started it, and it's just like Coach Furtado, if you gave me a great pass and I score, opposed to me running down the court and like pointing out myself like I'm so good, I can point to you and say good pass, and that way you feel valued for your contribution, and it shows that I appreciate that. And if you do that more times than not, your team will start to like get excited about all those teamwork moments.
Got you. So we got number one that you didn't touch on right there, but we already touched on before, is help them up, right? Really encouraging teammates to help their athletes up, right, when they get knocked down, which happens a lot in the sport of basketball, and it can happen, I'm sure, in quite a few different sports. Bench energy is a big one. I love that one. That's a great one. It's a great one because it gets everyone engaged and involved. In number three, talk about huddles, right? Quick little huddles, right? Real quick, hey, make sure you guard number 12. He's hot from three, right? Super, super easy opportunities. Or, hey, you got next shot, right? Easy opportunities to create communication. And then last one, I love points to the passer. We do that at our BTG camp sometimes. If you when we're doing our 2-on-2, 3-on-3, if you get a nice pass, we don't always do it, but sometimes if you don't thank your passer, boom, I kick you off, and then defense ends up, or two new teams come on. Just little habits. And so when we're talking about those habits, how do help build them? And I know you kind of alluded to it, talking about positive celebrations, but I'd love to hear how you make those habits across the duration of a season.
Yeah, I think we really emphasize a coaching staff, and I want to give a lot of credit to our coaches. We had three assistant coaches and one unofficial volunteer that would help out on the weekends, and I was just so blessed to have like a starting five coaching staff, and we all valued culture and just it really just boils down to like really caring about the success of your teammates and the team as a whole, and not just yourself. And so that means sacrificing sometimes, maybe your shots or your playing time, right? Just whatever the team needs. And it helped that we were winning a lot of games and we beat some teams that we probably shouldn't have beat. And in terms of just the culture piece, we'd watch a lot of film, and I love breaking down like, hey, like, do we see how like when that player got subbed out, you didn't stand up, right? Like, so what message does that send to the team? Or if like, hey, you took a layup, you didn't get the foul call, you complained to the referee, and then you left your teammates down there 5-on-4. And so that's like, a little bit of strategy stuff, but just culture is like just the way we go about our business every day. And so we had a glue guy of the week, which something
Love
that
it.
I
Love it.
created. And so we just had a piece of paper and it just stated all the things that we thought were important, like keeps the team connected, always positive, leads by example. And so I'd give them the paper. Every Thursday we would do that, and then I'd have a little glue stick just to
Love
symbolize
it.
like keeping the team together. So I think that was a little cool one that we would do. And then also something that's debatable in terms of how you lead a team is we didn't have any captains. And I thought that was important because I wanted everybody to be a leader and everyone has an influence on the team, regardless if you score the most points or you don't play at all. Everyone does have an influence on the environment. And the only type of captain we did was game captain. So whoever worked the hardest that week, they'd get to meet with the officials and the other team's captains. But I think that really contributed to our team. And we actually have school announcements about end of the season awards like MVP and things like that. There's four of them, and I asked like that to not be announced because we were still in the middle of our New England tournament run, which is like the farthest that you can go, and we were going to. We won our quarterfinal game and lost in our semifinal game, but I asked for that to not be announced just because I thought it could, do more harm than good. Just because we never cared about the awards, we just wanted to try to keep going as far as we could. And one thing I did want to just shout out our team for as well is in that semifinal game in the New England tournament, which is the farthest the team had made it. And definitely, it was 9 years before they had won the last conference championship, but definitely longer than for them making it that far in the New England tournament. And we were down 20, I think 25 points with 9 minutes to go at the number two seed in Rhode Island. And we came back and cut it to 3 points, and there's no way that happens if we weren't the most connected team, which is what we preached the whole season. So it was really cool to see all of it kind of come together and lead or end in a positive note for sure.
100%. I want to dive into that in your run in the conference championship game and kind of the story behind it. What does that look like in a game? But before that, I want to kind of make a comment on, I believe I took this from you with captains. I didn't do captains last year either. Game captains, I actually probably might steal it again from you with whoever worked the hardest, because I just did it. Like, I think I let every single kid had an opportunity. I had 17 kids on my Frosh soft team. I think almost every single kid. There was one kid who really did not buy in the culture. I don't think I ever let him be a captain, but every other kid got an opportunity to be a captain for a day, go up, talk to the refs, shake hands, and like I would say, 17 kids is a lot of kids for a basketball team. Like, I think everyone listening knows that only 5 play at a time. That means you got 11 or 12 guys sitting the bench. And I had 16 out of 17 guys that they're bought in, right? Because they felt like they were a part of it. So you can't, just for the coaches that are listening, don't underestimate just a little power that it could be to get a glue stick, right? For being recognized, for being that glue guy, or like being taking an opportunity to just be a captain and see their work recognized. I think that's really powerful. So, kind of diving into the story, right? Like, I know that championship game was back and forth. It was tough. How do you think that culture really helped the ball bounce your way for a victory?
It's honestly really fun to think about, but I would say a few months after the conference championship game, like my heart would palpitate. Like it just brought me back. And I was actually with our assistant coach yesterday, one of our assistants, and he was saying like how worked up he was, and I think it just came down to us caring so much for those kids. Like four of them had lost 2 years in a row in the conference championship when they knew they had the talent to win, and they all like just did extra work in the summer and in the preseason, and then during the season they would all just wanted to do extra work. And so in that championship game, you would, if you watched it back now, you would see like us down by 9 with I don't know, 6, 7, 8 minutes to go, and nobody ever pointed fingers. Like there was one time they sat in a 2-3 zone for all we had, I think, 16-minute halves. So for like 30 minutes they were just in a 2-3 zone. We didn't shoot too well that game, and so one of our players in the middle of the free throw line passed it right out of bounds. Like he got the ball and just threw it out of bounds, and at least two guys ran over and gave him a high five. Like, and then everybody, and then there's, if you look at the bench, we have two thumbs up, and we just had like a thumb up culture, and that just meant like you're good. Like it's all good. Like it happens. And throughout the season, we were building those habits. But in the championship game, like they had lost 2 years previously, and they easily could have blamed each other or just gave up. They like became closer together and connected. And the other team, because of that, we started pressing them, which we hadn't done in the two times we had played them prior, and they weren't able to really handle that too well. And so our team just kind of got the momentum, but we got the momentum while we were losing. And I think that just speaks volumes of their willingness to buy in, and also um, how much they cared about their teammates. Because some of those guys should have been starters, but they were on the bench while that run was happening, and you couldn't tell. So I just think that those types of things all add up to those big moments when you want to play your best basketball. And for any coaches listening that are going to try to implement some of these things, like it's not going to be perfect, the first few weeks or months. I've been coaching, like I said, the school for 3 years, so I was fortunate to have, I think, 6 of the 13 kids understand like our culture, and they could teach it to a class if you ask them to right now. And then the other 7 had to learn it throughout the season, and they bought in. So it definitely works. And the other thing I'll add to it, like these aren't my 14 principles. Like I've studied the best teams in the country. I actually just watched some of the championship game for the D3 women's game, and those teams huddle up. Their bench is going nuts every time they make a shot. They're giving high fives to each other. So it's just pretty consistent across the board for the best teams in the country.
100%. And you can't come back from down 9 with 6, 7 minutes left in a championship game with high pressure unless you love each other and have a
Mm-hmm.
connection. Like, it's just impossible. I mean, it's not impossible, I guess, if you have like a superstar top 1% athlete, but it doesn't sound like you had any guys that were going straight from high school to the pros. So it takes a team and a commitment and a bigger and a we over me, and both of us can kind of nut out over um culture, right? Kind of, really get into it. So I think, with that, as you were kind of talking about, you know, building that, I know those principles weren't necessarily yours. You took a lot of time to study them. Now, I think one of the challenges for me and myself, and someone who we can get so excited about culture, we want to try and do too many things. So, what are your kind of thoughts on, hey, maybe we should just pick 3 to 5 things from those 14 principles, or I'm sure there's a couple more principles that out there that help, that we need to emphasize, or, should we spend time, thinking about that before the season? Like, how do we kind of cultivate that? How do we prioritize what's important?
Yeah, I'm writing down a few notes of because I get excited about this too, and sometimes mine can
Yeah.
go in the wrong direction.
Get
Um,
carried away, I know, and
yeah.
then I'm like then I have so many things I need to reiterate, I forget what I need to reiterate.
When you and I talked, last week, like I was smiling the whole time, and got so many great ideas. So it's awesome that you have this platform to pay it forward and help others. And the four that I think easily implement without any really any extra work. One would be the touches, right? So as you walk into practice, and hopefully the coach is the first person there, and just a fist bump or a high five, like, "Hey, Justin, how you doing today?" And just acknowledge them by their name, right? Someone's name to them is like the most important thing that you can say to someone is just acknowledging them as by their name and making eye contact. And so if you do that, and you also teach your team when you come in the gym, if you see two of your teammates, you have to give a high five or fist bump before you touch a basketball, and that just kind of promotes the touch. And touches scientifically have a lot of positives to them, and the teams that touch more win more. So just as many touches as possible before games. We do a thing called the high five line that a lot of teams do. They did it in the both teams, France versus USA. They did it, and it's just a handshake. It could be a high five or a fist bump, or like a cool handshake into whatever they want. It could be different with each teammate, and that's just a good thing before the game to get them focused and energized. So we call that the high five line. The touch five is another universal one where if a player gets fouled and they're shooting 2 free throws, after the first free throw, the two players on the inside of the paint give a high five, and the two players outside give a pat on the back or a high five. And that's like something the Miami Heat do, and I love the Miami Heat. And you'll see the best teams in the country do that. And I think it's just if you can empower your teammate by saying like, "Hey, nice shot, like you got this," or if they miss it, make the next one. Like you can do this. I believe in you. Whatever it may be, like the power of that is so strong. And I have watched so much film, and I won't say it's 100% of the time, but if you watch someone miss the first free throw and then they have four teammates cheer them on, a lot of the times they make the second free throw. So that's pretty powerful, and obviously it helps the scoreboard. Uh, and then the last one is just shout outs, and that's probably my favorite one. And I do it with the cross country team I coach in middle school and our ultimate frisbee team in the spring, and all that is just praising behavior. So Justin, like you were relentless on the boards today. Like you boxed out the person, your player, every single time. You got some huge rebounds for us, and then you ran the court really well, and you had some great cuts to the basket that led to some open shots for us. In addition to being positive throughout the game, even when we weren't doing well, and then we would say two claps, and the team would go and clap twice, and then the next person would go. And it's just such a powerful thing to have the players speak up and praise their teammates for those good behaviors. And as the season goes on, like you could be there for 2-3 minutes because so many kids want to share and shout out their teammates. But at first, it's a little awkward, maybe and uncomfortable because they're not used to doing that. But if you create a safe environment, some really cool things can happen in the shout outs or accountability circle at the end.
100%. No,
Yeah.
we do a lot of similar things, and I've also had similar aspects when especially young teenage boys are very awkward. They're like, I have to give my teammate a compliment. But eventually, like, it's a part of BTG culture. The guys that have been with me for a year, they know, right? They know the expectation. They know it's different. And they're also some of the better communicators. Like, if you watch them, it's just it's a skill, and I think it's so important to have the teammates praise them. And you'd be surprised how many coaches don't do any of this, like the positive touches as soon as they come in the gym, or like the most common thing at the end of practice, right, is like each coach goes and says their 30 seconds to 1 minute plus spiel, and the kids never get an opportunity to talk except for maybe the captain at the end. But what I like is you're getting everyone involved, and to me, that's how you come back from being down 9. You have to feel like you belong to something bigger.
That's so good. And if I can just add one or two things. One is in our conversation, I asked you, excuse me, what you thought was like one of the most important things for a successful culture, and you said listening, and just asking good questions and listening to what they have to say. And I think that's so powerful because there's a leadership style called servant leadership, where like
Yep.
in a company, the CEO is at the top, and then you have management, employees, and customers at the bottom, and the servant leadership flips that upside down. And so that would be like the coach at the bottom and the players and everyone else above that. And it's like, how can I serve everyone that I'm, quote unquote, in charge of to help them do their job to the best of their ability? And so you talking about listening, I think is so powerful. And then the other one is that like for us at halftime, we give them 2 or 3 minutes to just talk among themselves, and then we come in and we say, "So what do you got, guys? Like, what do you have?" And they're like, "Hey, coach, like we're not rebounding, we're not sprinting back on defense and communicating. We're taking quick shots." And honestly, they usually say everything that you were going to say as a coach and more,
Right.
and it makes your job a lot easier, and they feel so much more invested. And then after the game, we also ask like, what did we do well and what could we improve? And I just think, like you said, like the player voice, it just creates an accountability and ownership. And honestly, a lot of them are. I'm never think I'm the smartest person in the room, and so these kids, they provide some really good ideas. And 15 brains are better than one or whatever you have on your team. So some really, if you just take a step back, have a little humility and like confidence in your abilities as a coach, you can learn a lot. And I would also say that like I definitely messed up like some strategy stuff throughout the season, and I would, if we won a game, I would say that's all the players and the coach, like the assistant coaches, and if we lose, it's my fault because I didn't prepare you guys well. I may have called a bad play or whatever, but like so when I mess up, my fault, guys. That's my bad, and that like humanizes you to them, and they know it's okay to mess up, and it just creates a great environment that I think coaches have the ability to do with their role as a head coach.
100%. Yeah, that's what you kind of brought the point to it. Is it takes a level of humility. And I was going to say, like, how much do you think, like, I feel like just this is I don't know if I have a data point, this is kind of more of a feeling thing, but I feel like coaches have a hard time doing what we're talking about because everything that you just said, like what do you do well, right? What do you need to improve on? We literally do that like every single session. Sometimes I like want to ask different questions because I feel like they get a little stale of those questions. Maybe you could share some of those in a minute. But with that being said, like it's hard because like as a coach, we feel like we have to have all the answers. Information has to flow from us. Like we got to set the tone. But I think, the best teams, and there are different ways to win, but I do genuinely believe the teams like that are the most bought in, feel like they belong. Of course, you have to have skill, right? Those teams are going the farthest, right? And so that's so important. And I kind of to build on that. Do you have any thoughts to add on that before I ask a follow up?
No, I think you nailed it. I think, yeah, I think that just creating the environment where anyone can speak up. It doesn't matter if you're the manager, or a younger player or assistant coach, whatever it may be. That great things can happen in that space.
I love that. So this would kind of be this might be a little easier question, and I'll go one more question before we kind of wrap up here. Is because we do the very similar things, like how did you improve and what did you do well today? Do you have any other questions that you kind of add in terms of variety? Because I do feel like sometimes, and maybe I'm overthinking it, but I sometimes feel like the questions they kind of go through the motions,
I would say,
and it's
is
okay
it?
if not. I'm
Yeah.
just curious.
No, it's a very good question. I don't think I have specific questions for after the game. I will say for JV, we did used to go around. I did this at camps I used to coach at. Um, I coached at Syracuse camp for a few years, and about every game we would sit down as a team and we would go around and say one thing that you were going to promise your team that you will do better for the rest of the week.
Mm,
And if you said boxing out or you said take better shots, then you can't say that again for the rest of the week. So obviously with a winter team, saying that you're not gonna you're gonna make sure you box out good for the rest of the season, like that's a big commitment. But I think that could be a little wrinkle into it. And if everybody does one thing a little bit better over time, like you're gonna cover everything that you need to do to be have a competitive advantage and have a chance to compete. But something that we do, and I've learned this from other coaches, is we do a preseason form that they fill out. We do a mid-season form and then a postseason. And I always ask like, what would you change and what is going well, and also like, is there anything I should know about you as a person and player to coach you to the best of your ability? And some kids might say, I don't like to be yelled at. One kid said to me, I like to be yelled at. Like that, I think I play better. And I had to speak
right.
to him like, I will hold you to maybe a higher standard, but I'm not a yeller. But if you're not doing something right,
Yeah.
like we'll talk. And so I've learned a lot of information from them through email or Google form or when we sit down in a classroom and we just write down things like that. And it's confidential just for me. And again, that's just me taking feedback. And one thing I will say that I again learned from reading a book is like everybody should know what our culture is. So I got a through all the feedback I got for why they had thought they had lost the past 2 years, I got a sign and it said our boys basketball, and it said vision, and it said one, most connected team, two, best defensive team, and three, most unselfish team. And I felt like if we were the most connected and united and together team, we'd have a fighting chance through adversity, which showed in that championship game. And when best defensive team, like if we just locked up and like loved boxing out, loved sprinting back on defense and fighting through screens and knowing the scouting report. And then if we just shared the ball and didn't care who scored, like good things would happen. And I brought that sign to every team building session, every practice, and would put it out. And so we would see it every day. And that all came from the player feedback and what they felt like the team needed. So a lot of really cool things that the coaches can do. And some coaches are limited in time. Maybe it's just that, one coach, they don't have an assistant. But a lot of this you can add within your practice time or game time and see some significant differences.
I just like how you reframed it. You said a promise. We're big on talking about commitments at BTG. Same thing, right? I commit to, and I almost think like tomorrow I commit to boxing out, right? Especially if it's a season, that way we can stack days. Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, working with young kids, they promise something in August. Like December rolls around, they don't even remember what they said in August. And to be honest, I might even be the same thing, unless I'm writing it down every day. But I really like talking about the vision board as well, kind of painting that, and just having that collective. Everyone wants to win the conference championship game, right? Nick Saban talks about it all the time. But what's the process of getting to that? That's a result. That's an outcome. He actually talks about that's not even a goal, right? What's the goal? Who are we going to be every single day? And so I watched that on a plane on my way back from looking at wedding venues, and that fired me up. That fired me up. So I know we're running out of time, and I want to be mindful of time. So my final question for you today, I mean, shoot, we're just gonna have to do part 3. But before we get into part 3, um, what's this season looking like? What's the culture? How do you build on top of that? Because they always talk about it's easy to get to the mountaintop. Or it's not easy to get to the mountaintop. It's easier to get to the mountaintop than it is to stay at the mountaintop.
Great question. I'm gonna need to zoom you into our team to help us out this season.
Okay.
But we have a lot of returners and some new guys that are really excited. I had one of our students walk in my office and looked at the trophy and said like, I want to go back to back. So they're locked in and ready to go. I would say just valuing the relationships and strengthening them. All right, guys, everybody's a year older now, or some guys are coming in, and that's what they're chasing, is to try to play it as long as they possibly can. And so, just continuing to support them in their activities, or go watch a soccer game. A lot of them play soccer, so I went to one of those games, and and then also strengthening the relationships with our assistant coaches. as well. I golfed with one of our assistant coaches who's he's retired. He's amazing, and he was like our press guy, offense, defense, and just added so much value with the fundamentals. Um, One of our other assistants, like we've also golfed together, not well, but we all enjoy playing. And then my older brother, I did want to give him a shout out because during our season, I was so focused on the culture because team chemistry was like the number one thing that the guys really wanted to improve, and I got to a point where I was so focused on that I wasn't holding guys to the highest standard of like being relentless on the court and 50-50 balls and like and just bringing it every day at like a really high level. And so a few months into the season, he called me and he just kind of said like, I feel like you're holding back a little bit. And he's like that chip on the shoulder that you've always played with. Like I feel like you're not bringing it. And I was like, I know, but I'm just so focused on them like being connected and caring about each other and all that stuff that like I need to focus on that first. He's like, I think they got it. Like I think that they're there. And I just was, and that's my 5 years older, like he like, relationship. Like he probably was 200-0 before I finally beat him in basketball. Like, he was always very competitive. So that's when like the light bulb kind of went on for me. And I asked the team, I was like, hey, can I hold you guys to like this higher standard? Like, and they all like a bunch of them just smiled and like eyes lit up. They're like, please, like we want to be coached, and they wanted that, like because there was more, and so I give him a lot of credit for, and I just having him on the bench was great, and those stressful games he was always there as a reliable big brother. So it was a lot of fun, and happy to talk to anyone that wants to reach out to me to answer any questions, as I know you are, Justin. And I think it's rare to have people care so much about the kids and doing things the right way and that help them become good humans and people and in their lives. So all this stuff builds up, from the basketball court out into their everyday lives. And I had one of our seniors who just graduated text me saying he tried out for the football team, the club football team, and that he had many help them up moments, and he was a big energy guy. And then he ended up making the team out of like 70 kids, and he definitely credited it to some of this stuff. So pretty cool stuff, and just appreciate the energy that you bring, Justin, and all the resources you provide so many people.
I love that. I love that. That's awesome. I feel like those are the best things, right? That's the most rewarding part of a coach is when they shoot you a text and give an example of how a life lesson that they learned from an experience that we were all a part of together, and they got to use it. That's what it's all about. So my final thing will be like, where can people connect with you? And then I know you got the book. Let's plug the book and any other resources you got.
Yeah, so my email is contact Dan Horwitz at gmail.com, CONTACTDANHORWITZ at gmail.com. My book right here is Help Them Up, and it's on Amazon. And something cool that I'm doing this fall, I think I have 7 spots left just because of time. But I would do Zoom calls with teams to share the 14 principles, and also not just like a presentation, but I ask the team to speak up after every principle and share why they think it's important, how good they are at it currently. And then at the end of the call, they can meet with their coach and talk about the few they really want to focus on this year. So, yeah, love this stuff, and just appreciate the opportunity, and thank you so much for having me. And I love Beyond the Scoreboard. I just feel like there's so much to it, but you do things the right way, and things usually work out.
Appreciate that. Thanks for coming on, Dan, and thanks for sharing those resources. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Beyond the Scoreboard podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and share it with a friend, coach, or parent you feel like would get value from this episode. It's our responsibility to impact as many parents and coaches who are the ones that are impacting our athletes. That's how we create a ripple effect. So thank you for being a part of our community, and we look forward to serving you all next week.